the Science Guy.
Hey guys, in case you haven't noticed, our Uncle Bill isn't here today. He's away at a conference, and so today we're taking over his show.
I'm Gil.
And I'm Krill.
And
we are the Whale Guys. A whale is a warm-blooded marine mammal. Whales are social creatures and often travel in pods. They have streamlined bodies that are thick and rounded, making them very hydrodynamic.
They have horizontal tail flukes that are their sole source of propulsion through the water. Their rib cage and spines are very flexible, but whales haven't always been this way.
So where exactly did whales come from?
Does anyone know the closest related species living to whales?
Is it A, elephants, B, walruses, or C, hippos?
If you guessed C, hippos, you were correct.
Don't believe us? Well, let's take a look at this extremely convenient phylogenetic tree. This tree allows us to see the common ancestors of whales dating back to 50 million years ago. But let's zoom in a little more.
Today we're going to talk about 4 key examples: the Pakicetus, Ambulocetus, Rhodocetus, and Durodon. These preceded modern whales that together exhibit their evolution.
There are many derived characteristics that support the claim that whales evolved from terrestrial mammals. However, we're going to focus on 2 of them: overall changes in the skull and overall changes in their limbs.
Now, let's take a look into our microscopic viewer of science.
Modern whales evolved from a group of animals called Archaeoceti. These ancient whales can be divided into 5 families, 4 of which we will highlight. The first family is called Pakicidae, and the species we will focus on for this family is called the Pakicetus. Externally, Pakicetus look nothing like a modern whale, as you can see in this picture. They somewhat resembled wolves, with their long snouts and powerful tails. These animals likely only lived from the early to middle Eocene, approximately 50 million years ago in modern-day India and Pakistan. The nasal opening was near the front of the head. The limb bones of Pakicetus were very dense, which was probably a means to counteract buoyancy and allow them to wade into water. Fossils of Pakicetus are only found in freshwater deposits, and most are known from deposits that represent shallow ephemeral streams in an arid climate. It is unlikely that they are good swimmers. Instead, they likely ventured into water for short periods of time for feeding. The forelimbs and hind limbs function for walking and are not specialized in any way for swimming yet. Based on different concentrations of oxygen isotopes, scientists can hypothesize about what kind of environment each different evolutionary step of whales lived. These isotopes can be found in the fossils of the whales and can determine whether the particular species lived in saltwater or freshwater. This information is very helpful in determining the order in which the different species evolved, since early whales had to slowly transition from land dwelling and occasionally going into shallow water to living mostly in freshwater and eventually living in salt water like today. Based on this geochemical evidence, scientists have hypothesized that Pakicetus only went into the water for brief periods of time and was largely land dwelling. Scientists have used paleontological and geochemical evidence to support these hypotheses.
The next family we'll talk about is the Ambulocetus, more specifically the Ambulocetus. The Ambulocetus lived about 48 million years ago. As you can see in this picture, it resembled a crocodile in many aspects, with its short limbs and a powerful body and tail. The Ambulocetus had a large head with a long snout, with its eyes on the top, facing forward. The nostrils have moved further up the skull than its ancestor, the Pakicetus. Unlike the Pakicetus, the Ambulocetus limbs were water-friendly. Like I stated before, its hind limbs were short, but its feet were quite long. The long paddle-shaped feet indicate that it swam like a modern-day otter by swinging its hind limbs through the water and creating additional propulsive force with its robust tail. The general movement is somewhat similar to how modern-day whales swim. Their forelimbs were short and their front feet were significantly shorter than their back feet. This skeletal structure indicates the Ambulocetus was probably slow on land. Due to its slowness on land and its skeletal structure, it is believed that it was an ambush hunter, attacking prey in or near shallow water, the same method used by modern-day crocodiles. Ambulocetus is only known from near-shore marine environments, and geochemical analysis of its bones indicate that it drank a mixture of fresh and salt water like those of estuaries or bays.
The species of protocoetid that we will focus on is called the Rhodhocetus. The Rhodhocetus had a long snout, large eyes, and their nasal opening was farther caudally than in earlier Archaeocetes. This nostril drift suggests that it could breathe while holding much of their head horizontally, similar to modern whales. This evolutionary change foreshadows the origin of the blowhole. The Rhodhocetus tail is well developed and strong. The hind limbs are reduced. In some species of protocoetid, the pelvis isn't connected to the vertebral column. This suggests that the hind limb did not support the body weight. This wasn't the case in the Rhodhocetus, but is evidence of the transition from limbs specialized for walking to the loss of the hind limb and the specialization of the forelimb to swimming. The legs of Rhodhocetus were more powerful for swimming, but could still function on land, though they may not have been the best for quick movement. Geochemical data indicate that Rhodhocetus drank salt water, and fossils are found in nearshore saltwater deposits. This indicates that they may have lived in bays and saltwater swamps.
The last family we'll talk about today are the Basilosauridae, more specifically the Dorudon. Dorudon lived about 40 million years ago and was completely aquatic. It is believed that the members of Basilosauridae were probably the earliest fully aquatic cetaceans, and are thought to have given rise to the modern-day cetaceans. As you can see in this picture, Dorudon's head was large and had a long snout, and its nostril had moved even further up the skull. The hind limbs of the Dorudon are greatly reduced and lack a bony connection to the vertebral column, making movement on land impossible. Dorudon's forelimbs were broad and had a flat fan shape. In addition, the elbow joint motion was very restricted. This means that the forelimbs were unable to flex. Thus, they moved in a very similar way to oars. They also lack sacral vertebrae, although vertebrae that are likely to be homologous to sacral vertebrae are identifiable. Many of the character state transformations that occur between basilosaurids and protocoetids are associated with the adoption of a fully aquatic existence, such as the presence of their sinuses on top of the head, extreme reduction in the hind limbs, loss of the sacrum, increase in the number of trunk vertebrae, and the presence of flat posterior vertebrae. Results of testing oxygen isotopes show similarities in environment between the Rhodhocetus and the Dorudon. This makes sense as they are a later radiation of whales. These results indicate that they lived in shallow marine environments.
Now we're going to look at some embryological evidence. By studying modern cetacean embryos, scientists have been able to further support their hypothesis of the evolution of whales from terrestrial mammals.
Modern adult cetaceans do not have visible hind limbs, but cetacean embryos do initiate development of hind limbs. In the pantropical spotted dolphin, the hind limb bud arrests and degenerates in about the 5th week of gestation.
The bud forms an apical ectodermal ridge, which expresses FGF8 gene initially, but is not maintained. The sonic hedgehog gene is absent, which mediates signaling activity of the zone of polarizing activity. This means that the expression of sonic hedgehog was reduced over the evolution of whales, resulting in the loss of hind limb elements in adult whales.
Hind limb size was greatly reduced by the gradually operating microevolutionary changes. After locomotor function in the hind limbs was completely lost, modulation of developmental control genes eliminated most of the hind limb skeleton. This process can be seen in this image.
In embryo development, nostril drift can also be observed. The nostrils start at the far end of the snout, which is where nostrils are located for terrestrial mammals. However, during development, the nostrils slowly drift upwards to form the blowhole in modern whales. There's no denying that whales evolved from terrestrial mammals. Unlike some other animals, this is really the only existing theory. From land to water, whales evolved rapidly in response to a changing environment.
It is likely that changes in ocean structures and ocean ecosystems strongly correlate with certain structural changes and ecological changes in cetaceans. This suggests that the distribution of abundance of global food resources has played a major role in their evolution.
Scientists have used several forms of evidence to support their theory of evolution from terrestrial mammals to whales. Embryology shows evidence of early hind limb development and the presence of the nostril at the front of the snout. The hind limb bud arrests, however, and doesn't further develop after about the 5th week in one particular species.
The nostril drifts backward caudally along the snout and onto the top of the head throughout development. These embryological data help support the idea of the two derived characteristics being central to whale evolution.
Paleontological data help to create a timeline of when different organisms lived. The differences in their skeletons can lead to the identification of derived characteristics, which can sometimes lead to an insight about what kinds of selection pressures the species could have been facing.
Scientists also used fossils to obtain geochemical data. This can include different concentrations of oxygen isotopes, which help us gain a better understanding of what kinds of environments and different evolutionary steps lived in. These 3 data types are just a few examples of how scientists can go about studying evolution.
So, let's do a quick recap of what we learned today.
Whales evolved from a group of terrestrial mammals called Archaeoceti.
These were divided into 5 different families, 4 of which we highlighted in this video: the Pachycidae, the Ambulocetunae, Protocetids, and the Basilosaurids.
Over a course of roughly 50 million years, they evolved from land-dwelling mammals with nostrils at the front of their snout and attached prominent hind limbs to fully aquatic with nostrils and the top of their heads and to form a blowhole and non-existent hind limbs.
The story of the evolution of whales is a fascinating one. They are one of only a few species to make an evolutionary U-turn, coming out of the water much earlier than going back into the water from land. And to think that in just 50 million years, something that looked very much like a dog could evolve into the largest animal in the world is absolutely astounding.
We hope you've enjoyed learning about the evolution of whales as much as we've enjoyed teaching you. Next week, our Uncle Bill will be back. So until then, we'll see you later.
Dory, this is not whale. You're speaking like upset stomach.
Maybe I should try humpback.
No, don't try humpback. You're... All right. You actually sound sick.
Maybe louder, huh?
Don't do that.
Too much orca. Didn't it sound a little orca-ish?
It doesn't sound orca. It sounds like nothing I've ever heard.